The storm of damnation. The night the ocean swallowed the Mercy, thunder sounded like cannon fire, and the wind howled through torn sails like the screams of the damned. Lightning carved ghostly shapes across the waves, fleeting shadows of men who once dreamed of gold, now praying for their souls. Amid that chaos, one voice rose above the storm, not in terror, but in laughter. It was the sound of a man who'd long since made peace with hell. The pirates of the Crimson Widow had come to collect what they believed the sea owed them, and that night, the sea was generous. When dawn came, the horizon was quiet again. The storm had passed. Bodies floated like driftwood in the mist. Only one sailor, barely breathing, clung to a shattered plank. His name was Elias Gray, and before the sun set again, he would no longer be a sailor, but a pirate. The recruitment. Elias woke to the sting of salt in his mouth and the taste of blood on his tongue. His eyes opened slowly, to a world half swallowed by fog. The air was heavy with rot and the faint sound of gulls crying overhead. A dark shape loomed over him, a man with a beard tangled like seaweed and eyes that glowed faintly gold in the morning sun. "Still alive, are ye?" the stranger growled. "Then today's your lucky day." But nothing about that day was lucky. The man's name was Captain Rourke, known across the Caribbean as the Black Wolf. He commanded a ship feared more than the devil's own, the Crimson Widow. The name alone was whispered in ports from Havana to Nassau. It was said her crew never left survivors. Except, apparently, Elias Gray. "Can ye stand?" Rourke asked, gripping Elias by the collar. "If ye can breathe, ye can work. If ye can work, ye can live." And so it began, not with a choice, but a command. Elias was dragged aboard the Crimson Widow, his wrists bound, his throat dry, his mind a haze of pain and disbelief. He had been a simple deckhand aboard a merchant vessel bound for Port Royal, nothing more than a poor man chasing a poor man's wage. Now, surrounded by thieves, murderers, and outlaws, he had become something he'd sworn never to be. Life aboard the Widow. The Crimson Widow was unlike any ship Elias had ever seen. The deck was stained with blood, the air thick with smoke and tar. Every man aboard carried a blade somewhere on his person, even the cook. There were rules, of course. Pirates had more order than anyone on land would believe. Rourke called it the code. Every man gets his share. Days turned to weeks. He scrubbed decks, hauled sails, loaded cannons, and learned to swing a cutlass under threat of death. He watched as men drank themselves into madness, fought over stolen silver, and carved their names into the wood of the ship, small marks to prove they'd lived before the sea took them. At night, when the world was still, Elias would stare at the stars and whisper a prayer. Not to God, God had long abandoned these waters, but to the sea itself. The blood baptism. The first time Elias killed a man, he did it by accident. A Spanish frigate had crossed their path near Tortuga, her flag bright against the blue. The Widow gave chase. Cannon fire split the air, thunder louder than any storm. Elias was loading powder when the deck shook beneath him. The blast threw him into the rail, splinters slicing his arms. A man came charging from the smoke, not a pirate, but a Spaniard, bloodied and screaming. Elias grabbed the nearest weapon, a rusted boarding knife, and drove it forward. He didn't even feel it sink in. When the fight was over, Rourke clapped him on the back. "Congratulations, lad," the captain said with a grin. "The seas baptized ye in blood." From that day on, Elias wasn't a sailor pretending to be a pirate. He was one. Rum, rot, and rotting souls. Life aboard the Widow blurred into a fevered dream of violence and rum. The crew lived on salt pork, hardtack, and the hope of the next raid. They drank to forget the screams. Men lost limbs to cannon fire, eyes to splinters, minds to the heat. The surgeon, if you could call him that, used saws instead of scalpels and rum instead of mercy. The smell of decay clung to everything. Even the gold felt cursed. At night, Elias began hearing things, whispers in the wind, voices in the wood. Some men said the ship was haunted by the souls it had taken. Others said the sea was just talking back. Either way, no one slept easy. The illusion of freedom. For all their talk of freedom, pirates were slaves to the same thing as everyone else, fear. They feared the navy, they feared mutiny, and most of all, they feared Rourke. The captain's word was law, and he ruled with an iron hand and a smile that never reached his eyes. Elias once saw him throw a man overboard for stealing rum. Another time, he ordered 2 men to duel to the death over a dispute worth less than a coin. When asked why, Rourke simply said, "If a man bleeds for a trifle, he'll kill for a treasure." It was madness disguised as wisdom, and it worked. The curse of the compass. One evening, Rourke summoned Elias to his cabin. The room was lit by a single candle and filled with maps, charts, and strange trinkets, skulls, bones, bits of broken compass glass. "Ye've got good hands, Gray," Rourke said. "And eyes that don't shake. I've got a task for ye." He opened a chest and drew out a compass unlike any Elias had ever seen. Its needle spun wildly, never pointing north. "This'll lead us to something greater than gold," Rourke whispered. "A place the sea itself hides. The Isle of Dead Men." Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. He didn't believe in curses, not until that moment. From that night onward, the Crimson Widow sailed into waters uncharted, following a compass that refused to obey the world. The crew began to vanish, one by one. Food spoiled overnight. The wind turned cold even in the tropics. Some said the compass was cursed. Others said it was guiding them to the devil's doorstep. Elias started to believe both. The price of survival. Weeks later, as another storm rolled in, Elias stood at the bow, staring into a black horizon. He wasn't sure what was worse, dying at sea or living another day under Rourke's command. "Ye don't survive the life," the boatswain once told him. "Ye endure it, until the sea decides it's done with ye." That night, lightning split the sky, and the compass began to spin faster than ever before. The crew panicked. Rourke laughed. And Elias realized something no man should ever know, that freedom, when bought with blood, feels no different from chains. The code and the curse. The wind had changed. Not the kind of change sailors welcomed, not the gentle shift that whispered of land or fortune, but a cold, ghostly breeze that seemed to rise from the deep itself. Every man aboard the Crimson Widow felt it. The sails hung limp. The sea had gone eerily calm, like glass stretched over darkness. Even the gulls were gone. For 3 days, they drifted beneath a sky without color, following a compass that refused to rest. Elias stood by the rail, eyes hollow. He hadn't slept since the storm. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the men who'd been swept away, and sometimes, he thought he heard them whispering beneath the waves. "Don't listen," said old Morgan, the ship's carpenter. His hands were twisted with arthritis, his beard gray as fog. "That's the sea talkin'. She wants ye to listen so she can pull ye under." Elias tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. Rourke's Law. Captain Rourke called the crew to deck at dawn. His coat was soaked with salt, his face shadowed by the rising sun. "Men," he said, "we've sailed beyond the edge of any map drawn by mortal hands. That compass points to glory, but only for those who remember the code." He drew a pistol and placed it on the barrel beside him. "Break the code," he said softly, "and ye answer to me." The code was simple, brutal, and final. No man steals from another's share. No man deserts the ship. All treasure is divided by vote. Every man fights until death or mercy. Betray the crew, and you die where you stand. It was their religion. Their only law. And beneath it all, the unspoken rule, never question the captain. The vanishing. The first man to disappear was Thomas Hale, a young gunner from Bristol. One night he was there, cursing at the sky. By morning, only his boots remained, neatly placed beside the mast. The men whispered of ghosts, of curses, of the compass leading them into a place where death forgot how to sleep. "Maybe he fell," Elias suggested, but no one believed it. The next day, another man vanished. Then 2 more. By the end of the week, 6 crewmen were gone. Rourke didn't flinch. He ordered the deck swabbed clean and told the rest to keep working. "The sea takes what she's owed," he said. But Elias saw something in the captain's eyes, not faith, not courage, but fear. The map of shadows. Late one night, Elias crept toward the captain's cabin. He wasn't alone. Morgan followed, limping silently, carrying a lantern wrapped in cloth. Inside, Rourke sat hunched over a table covered in maps. The cursed compass spun beside him. Elias held his breath. The maps weren't ordinary, they were drawn in red ink that shimmered like blood. Each mark was a name, each circle a grave. "St. Anne's Reef." "Dead Man's Cay," Morgan whispered. "Places no ship returns from." And at the center of the largest map, a single word, Leviathan. Elias felt the air go cold. The captain turned suddenly, eyes burning. "Enjoying the view, gentlemen?" They froze. Rourke smiled slowly. "If ye come to question the compass, ask yourselves this: have ye ever seen so much silence at sea? No waves. No wind. The world itself holding its breath. That's no curse, that's destiny." Morgan bowed his head, muttering a prayer. Elias said nothing. The illness. By the next week, sickness crept through the ship. Men's gums turned black, their skin blistered. Some coughed up blood. Others stared blankly at the horizon, whispering about things in the deep, shapes moving just beneath the surface. Elias did what he could to help, brought water, patched wounds, prayed quietly when no one was watching. But then came the night of the screams. A sailor named Dugan woke in madness, clawing at his face, shouting that something was crawling inside. By dawn, he was gone, and his hammock was shredded, soaked with blood. Rourke ordered the body tossed overboard without ceremony. The sea claims her own, he said again, but his voice was weaker now. Elias began to wonder, what if the sea was claiming them because they'd stolen what belonged to her? Mutiny in the dark. The breaking point came with the death of the ship's quartermaster, Briggs. He'd been the only man who could stand toe-to-toe with Rourke, strong, fair, respected. But one morning, his body was found hanging from the rigging. No one knew who did it. The crew whispered that Rourke had killed him to keep control. That night, beneath the lantern glow, whispers turned to plans. "Enough," said Morgan. "We end this madness before we all feed the sharks." Elias listened, torn between fear and loyalty. Mutiny meant death. But obedience meant something worse. When morning came, the men gathered on deck, silent, tense. Rourke stepped out, pistol at his hip, eyes sharp as knives. He knew. "Any man thinking of mutiny," he said, "should save me the trouble and jump now." No one moved. Then the boatswain, a hulking man named Carter, drew his cutlass. "We're done followin' a ghost's compass, Captain." The deck erupted. Steel clashed. Blood sprayed. Elias fought without thinking, ducking, striking, blocking, until the world was nothing but smoke and screams. When the chaos cleared, half the crew was dead. Carter lay bleeding at Rourke's feet. Rourke wiped his blade clean. "That's what comes of forgetting the code," he said quietly. Elias realized then, there was no mutiny, only survival. The black horizon. Weeks passed. The Widow drifted deeper into the uncharted sea. The compass spun slower now, as if growing tired. One night, Elias climbed to the crow's nest. The horizon was pitch black, no stars, no moon, only a faint red glow in the distance. "Land," he whispered. But as the ship approached, the glow grew brighter, not from torches or dawn, but from fire. An island of ash and bones. Ships wrecked along its shores. And above it all, carved into the cliffside, a single skull as tall as the mainmast. Rourke stood beside him, smiling. "We've found it." Elias felt his blood turn to ice. The curse revealed. The crew anchored offshore and went ashore at dawn. The sand was black as coal. Skeletons littered the beach, British, Spanish, nameless. In the center of the island stood a stone altar, half buried in coral. On it rested a chest bound in iron. Rourke knelt before it, whispering words Elias didn't recognize. When he opened it, there was no gold. No jewels. Only bones, human bones, carved with strange markings. The compass stopped spinning. A gust of wind roared through the island, scattering sand like ash. The men screamed. Some dropped to their knees. Rourke just laughed. "We've found eternity," he said. "And she's beautiful." Elias backed away slowly. He could feel the island breathing, a deep, slow pulse beneath his feet. That's when he knew, the treasure wasn't gold. It was a curse. Return to the widow. They left the island, but nothing felt the same. The compass no longer worked. The stars above them had shifted, unrecognizable. The water itself looked different, darker, thicker, like ink. Men began dying again, faster this time. Their eyes clouded white, their voices turned hollow. By the time they reached open water, only a handful remained. Rourke stayed in his cabin, muttering to himself, staring at the compass that no longer moved. Elias took the wheel one night and realized they were sailing in circles. The sea had trapped them. The breaking point. It happened on the seventh night. The crew gathered on deck, silent, pale, eyes empty. Rourke emerged, wild-haired, clutching the compass to his chest. "She's chosen us," he cried. "Don't ye see? We're immortal now." Elias stepped forward. "We're dead men, Captain." Rourke smiled, almost tenderly. "Then welcome to eternity, lad." He drew his pistol, but before he could fire, Elias lunged. The shot rang out, echoing across the endless sea. When the smoke cleared, Rourke lay bleeding, the compass shattered beside him. The ship went still. The sea fell silent. And somewhere in the darkness below, something stirred. Blood and rum. The sea was quiet again, too quiet. After Rourke's death, the ocean no longer roared or whispered. It only waited. The sun rose sickly yellow each morning, dim behind curtains of mist. The smell of tar and rot never left the deck. No songs. No laughter. Only the dull creak of timber and the drip of water seeping through old seams. Elias stood at the helm, hands blistered, eyes hollow. He had buried the captain himself, lashed a cannonball to the body and rolled it into the black. The splash had been small. The silence afterward had been enormous. The leftovers. Only 7 men remained aboard the Widow. Old Morgan, the carpenter. Reed, the cook whose mind had drifted far from reason. Jonas, the boy who still dreamed of home. 3 others, names half forgotten, faces drawn tight by hunger. They spoke little. They worked less. Every man waited for the sea to choose him next. At night, they gathered by the galley fire, sipping what little rum was left. It tasted like smoke and medicine. "Never thought I'd die sober," Morgan muttered. Reed laughed, a hollow, wet sound. "Ain't sober if the sea's inside ye already." Elias said nothing. He'd stopped speaking to them in full sentences. Words seemed useless when the world had stopped listening. Ghost light. On the 4th night, a strange glow shimmered beneath the waves, green, alive, pulsing like breath. Jonas swore he saw faces in it. Elias told him it was plankton, nothing more. But later, when he leaned over the rail, he too saw the outlines of eyes staring back. He stepped away quickly, his heart pounding. The sea looked like it was smiling. That night, he dreamed of Rourke's voice whispering through the hull. "Ye can't kill what the sea owns." Asterisk. Rot. The ship was dying with them. Masts groaned, ropes frayed, planks swelled with damp. Worms chewed through the beams. When they pumped the bilge, the water came up black. Reed cooked seagulls when he could catch them. Once, he served a stew no one recognized. Morgan asked what it was. Reed smiled. "Don't ask, old man. Best not to know." They ate it anyway. Hunger had no pride. The rum. When the food was gone, they turned to the rum, their last comfort, their last sin. They drank at sunrise, at noon, at dusk. It burned their throats and blurred the edges of horror. It kept them from hearing the voices that drifted through the fog. Elias rationed his share, though it hardly mattered. Each sip dulled his fear, but sharpened his memories, faces of those long lost, storms survived, blood spilled for promises of gold. He began writing on the inside of the hull with a nail, small words, scratched deep. If anyone finds this ship, turn back. The madness of Reed. One morning, Reed was gone. No splash, no struggle, just gone. But on the galley wall, scrawled in soot, they found words. She's calling me. That night, the sea glowed brighter than ever. Elias swore he heard singing. Not human singing, something vast and hollow, like wind through a graveyard. Morgan crossed himself. We shouldn't have touched that island. No one disagreed. The dead wind. By the second week, there was no wind at all. The sails hung like rags, limp and heavy. They drifted aimlessly, trapped in a floating grave. The water ration ran out. The rum turned to poison. Men began seeing things, phantoms walking the deck, lights in the mist, hands reaching from the water. Jonas jumped overboard one night, chasing a vision of his mother. Elias watched him disappear into the glowing deep, too weak to move. When dawn came, the sea was calm again. Morgan's secret. Old Morgan lasted longest. He spent his days repairing things no one used, tightening ropes, patching holes, talking to the ship as if it were a woman. Keep her steady, love, he'd whisper, stroking the wood. She's all that's left of us. Then one morning, Elias found him in the hold, sitting against a barrel, smiling faintly. He'd carved a tiny wooden cross and set it in his lap. His eyes were open but saw nothing. Elias closed them gently. Alone. Now there was only one. Elias Gray, the last sailor of the Crimson Widow. He tied himself to the wheel, steering toward a horizon that refused to move. He spoke to no one, yet answered every whisper the sea offered. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps behind him. Sometimes he felt hands on his shoulders. And always, somewhere below, he heard the steady heartbeat of the ship. The last bottle. There was one bottle of rum left. He saved it for the calmest day, the kind of day sailors once prayed for. The sky was clear. The sea was glass. The sun burned white. Elias uncorked the bottle and raised it to the windless air. To the crew, he said softly. To Rourke. To the damned. He drank until the bottle was dry, then set it adrift. It floated beside the ship for hours before sinking slowly into the dark. When it vanished, he smiled. Guess even the sea gets thirsty. The final storm. It began with a single gust, the first breath of wind in weeks. Then thunder. Then rain that hit like needles. Elias laughed. The storm was life. The storm was mercy. Waves rose taller than the masts. The ship groaned, twisted, broke. Lightning split the sky, and for a heartbeat he saw faces, his crew, smiling, waiting beneath the waves. He let go of the wheel. The Crimson Widow cracked apart, swallowed whole by the black. Epilogue of blood and rum. Days later, a merchant vessel found a floating plank carved with words. The sea keeps her promises. No bodies. No ship. Only silence. Sailors still whisper that on moonless nights, if you sail too far east of Tortuga, you'll see a faint red glow beneath the water, and hear laughter carried by the wind. They say it's the Crimson Widow, still drifting, crewed by ghosts, chasing a compass that no longer points anywhere at all. And if you listen long enough, you'll hear a voice whisper from the waves. You wouldn't survive. The Caribbean, 1718. The golden age of piracy was burning out like the last ember in a dying fire. The governors of the colonies were tired of the lawless seas, tired of merchants vanishing and of bodies washing ashore with their throats cut and their pockets empty. The Crown had decided that the era of pirates was over. And the British Navy was the hand chosen to erase them. But the sea doesn't forget easily. And the legend of the Crimson Widow refused to die. Rumors from the deep. For months, sailors spoke of strange sightings, a red glow on the horizon, the faint echo of cannon fire in calm weather, a ship that appeared in fog and vanished when hailed. Every tale ended the same way, no survivors. Some claimed it was a ghost ship. Others swore it was the remains of Rourke's crew, doomed to roam forever. But the Navy saw it differently. To the Admiralty, it was a threat. A superstition infecting men's courage. So they sent a ship, HMS Resolute, commanded by Captain Jonathan Mercer, a man whose sense of duty outweighed his fear of God. Mercer's mission. Mercer had no love for pirates. He had watched them hang at Port Royal, eyes bulging, tongues purple. He had lost men to their blades, his own brother to their greed. When orders came to hunt the phantom ship, he accepted without question. Superstitions are the refuge of weak men, he told his crew. Ghosts don't sail ships. Criminals do. And I intend to hang every last one. The Resolute sailed from Kingston under clear skies and a promise of vengeance. Echoes in the fog. The hunt lasted weeks. They found nothing but wreckage, splintered hulls, drifting barrels, broken masts. But one night, just before dawn, the lookout cried out. Light off the starboard bow. Mercer raised his spyglass. There it was, a faint, crimson glow, pulsing beneath the fog. Hard to starboard, he ordered. All hands to arms. The Resolute cut through the mist like a knife. And then they saw it. A ship. Black sails in tatters. No flag. No movement on deck. Her name still faintly carved into the wood, the Crimson Widow. The ghost crew. They boarded her at dawn. Silence ruled the deck. The smell of salt and decay hung heavy. Ropes swayed with the wind, creaking softly like old bones. The crew of the Resolute searched every corner, no bodies, no signs of life. Only the faint whisper of the sea against the hull. In the captain's cabin, Mercer found something strange. A shattered compass, its glass cracked, its needle motionless. Beside it, a journal bound in worn leather. He opened it and read. We followed her light, and she led us home to hell. It was signed, Elias Gray. The Haunting. That night, the men refused to sleep aboard the Widow. They swore they heard footsteps above them, whispers in the dark. The ship's bell rang on its own, slow, deliberate tolls. Mercer, unwilling to yield to superstition, ordered the vessel to be towed back to Port Royal. But as they sailed, a storm rose from nowhere. Rain lashed, thunder rolled, and waves taller than houses crashed against the ships. The line between them snapped. When the sun rose, the Crimson Widow was gone. The inquiry. Weeks later, Mercer stood before the governor in Kingston. He reported what he had seen, careful not to speak of ghosts or whispers. But the governor already knew. Sailors across the Caribbean spoke of a new horror, a phantom ship dragging the souls of the dead into the deep. "You chased a myth, Captain," the governor said coldly. "The sea cannot be punished." Mercer said nothing. He still dreamed of that red glow. The widow returns. A year later, near the coast of Bermuda, a merchant ship spotted a vessel drifting in calm water. Black sails. No flag. The crew hailed her. No answer. Then they heard laughter, faint, rolling across the waves like a memory. The merchant captain turned hard away, and none aboard ever spoke of it again. But sailors talk. They always do. And soon the legend grew. On nights when the sea is red and the wind dies, the Crimson Widow sails again, her cursed crew forever chasing a compass that points nowhere, the damned guardians of a treasure that was never gold. The empire moves on. By 1720, the British had hanged or pardoned nearly every pirate in the Caribbean. Port Royal, once a nest of thieves, became a fortress of law. The age of chaos ended. The age of empire began. But at sea, the old stories lingered. Mercer retired, older, haunted, always looking toward the horizon at dusk, as though expecting to see that faint, red light again. He never did. But on the night he died, his last words were a whisper to no one. "Tell them, she's still out there." Epilogue. Centuries have passed. Ships have changed. Maps have grown. But sometimes, on the stillest of nights, sailors crossing those same waters swear they see her, a dark silhouette gliding through mist, sails full though the air is calm. And if you listen close, you'll hear it too. The sound of a bell tolling softly over the water. And a voice carried by the wind. You wouldn't survive. The wind howled across the Caribbean night, the stars swallowed by thick clouds. Somewhere beyond the veil of fog, the sound of a bell echoed faintly, slow, hollow, mournful. Those who heard it swore the sound came from beneath the waves. From a ship that should not exist. The whispering tide. Decades had passed since the Crimson Widow vanished, yet her legend endured. Merchant sailors refused to sail certain routes at night. Fishermen whispered prayers before setting their nets. Even the toughest privateers lowered their voices when her name was mentioned. But legends have a way of evolving. By 1750, whispers spoke of more than a ship, they spoke of a man. A gaunt figure dressed in tattered black, face pale as moonlight, eyes burning red. Some called him the ghost of Elias Gray. They said he walked the decks of lost ships, calling out to sailors with a voice like thunder underwater. The sea remembers. The dead is not paid. The Merchant's Tale. One humid night near Tortuga, a merchant ship named the Providence sailed under a full moon. Her captain, Henry Wells, was a man of science, not superstition. He laughed at ghost stories. But the sea had other plans. As midnight struck, fog rolled in from nowhere, thick, wet, and heavy as death. The wind died. The sails went limp. The world went silent. Then came the bell. It tolled once, twice, thrice. A faint crimson light bled through the mist ahead. Wells peered through his spyglass, and froze. There she was. A ship with black, rotted sails and a broken mast, drifting silently against the wind. The words "The Crimson Widow" glimmered faintly on her hull. "Run her aground," Wells shouted. But no man moved. The helmsman's hands trembled. The first mate whispered, "Sir, she's moving without wind." The Providence shuddered. A chill swept over the deck. The lanterns dimmed. And then they heard footsteps. Someone, or something, was walking across their deck, though no one was there. The voice of the dead. The fog thickened until the crew could barely see their own hands. Then came a voice, deep, hollow, impossible to locate. "The sea does not forgive, nor forget." Captain Wells felt his breath freeze in his throat. The voice grew closer, louder. "You sail her waters, you steal her gold, you mock her curse." The crew panicked. Some prayed. Others leapt overboard into the black water. But the ones who stayed saw him. A tall, thin figure standing on the quarterdeck. Clothes shredded by salt and time. Eyes burning red beneath the shadow of a tricorn hat. Chains coiled around his wrists, dragging behind him with every step. "Elias Gray," whispered Wells. The ghost smiled, not cruelly, but sadly. "You shouldn't have come this way." The fog swallowed the ship whole. When the dawn came, the Providence was found drifting empty near the Bahama Channel. No bodies. No cargo. No logbook. Only the faint smell of gunpowder and salt. The curse spreads. In the following years, the disappearances multiplied. Fishing boats. Navy cutters. Even Spanish galleons, all vanished after reporting the same red light. The British Admiralty declared the sightings delusions caused by fatigue and rum. But sailors knew better. Some said the Crimson Widow appeared to those who defied the sea, captains who broke oaths, men who betrayed their crews, merchants who drowned their debtors. The ship was the sea's revenge. Others believed Elias Gray himself was trapped in a loop of eternal guilt, forced to wander forever, warning others never to make his mistake. The Hidden Journal. In 1762, a British diver exploring a wreck near Nassau found something remarkable, a sealed chest wrapped in oilskin, inside the remains of a ship believed to be the Widow. Inside the chest was a water-stained journal. The first page was torn, but the handwriting was clear. It was Elias Gray's. The final entry read, "The sea called my name. I thought I could master her. But no man masters what was born of chaos. The sea has a memory. And she will claim every soul that forgets." The diver who found the journal never surfaced again. His partner said he saw a crimson glow rising from below before the rope snapped. The journal was never recovered. The ghost returns. Centuries later, in 1821, a clipper named the Aurora sailed from Charleston to Havana. Her captain, Samuel Price, was a veteran of the War of 1812, brave, confident, unshaken by tales of old. On the second night, fog surrounded them. The air grew heavy. And the sea turned red. The lookout screamed. A ship, black as coal, sails shredded, hull glowing faintly, was drifting alongside them. The same name carved into the wood. The Crimson Widow, asterisk. Captain Price, thinking it a derelict, ordered his men to prepare to board. But as they approached, they saw something impossible. Figures, shadowy, translucent, working the rigging. Men with no eyes. Faces pale and dripping with seawater. And standing at the helm, Elias Gray. He raised his head slowly, meeting Price's eyes across the void of mist and water. Then he whispered one word. "Turn back." The Aurora turned, sails catching wind that shouldn't exist, fleeing into the dark. They reached Havana 3 days later with half the crew mad from terror. Captain Price never sailed again. Eternal watch. By the mid-1800s, the Crimson Widow became less of a legend and more of a maritime omen. Ships claimed to see her before every great storm, before every tragedy. Witnesses reported the same red light, the same tolling bell. "Elias Gray," whispered Wells. The ghost smiled, not cruelly, but sadly. "You shouldn't have come this way." The fog swallowed the ship whole. When the dawn came, the Providence was found drifting empty near the Bahama Channel. No bodies. No cargo. No logbook. Only the faint smell of gunpowder and salt. The curse spreads. In the following years, the disappearances multiplied. Fishing boats. Navy cutters. Even Spanish galleons, all vanished after reporting the same red light. The British Admiralty declared the sightings delusions caused by fatigue and rum. But sailors knew better. Some said the Crimson Widow appeared to those who defied the sea, captains who broke oaths, men who betrayed their crews, merchants who drowned their debtors. The ship was the sea's revenge. Others believed Elias Gray himself was trapped in a loop of eternal guilt, forced to wander forever, warning others never to make his mistake. The Hidden Journal. In 1762, a British diver exploring a wreck near Nassau found something remarkable, a sealed chest wrapped in oilskin, inside the remains of a ship believed to be the Widow. Inside the chest was a water-stained journal. The first page was torn, but the handwriting was clear. It was Elias Gray's. The final entry read, "The sea called my name. I thought I could master her. But no man masters what was born of chaos. The sea has a memory. And she will claim every soul that forgets." The diver who found the journal never surfaced again. His partner said he saw a crimson glow rising from below before the rope snapped. The journal was never recovered. The ghost returns. Centuries later, in 1821, a clipper named the Aurora sailed from Charleston to Havana. Her captain, Samuel Price, was a veteran of the War of 1812, brave, confident, unshaken by tales of old. On the second night, fog surrounded them. The air grew heavy. And the sea turned red. The lookout screamed. A ship, black as coal, sails shredded, hull glowing faintly, was drifting alongside them. The same name carved into the wood. The Crimson Widow, asterisk. Captain Price, thinking it a derelict, ordered his men to prepare to board. The same voice whispering through the fog. But the sea never gives up its ghosts. Epilogue, The Living Curse.
Modern historians dismissed the tales as sailors' nonsense, until 1998, when a research vessel mapping the seafloor near the Bahamas recorded an anomaly. Sonar showed a massive wooden structure resting deep beneath the coral shelf. The outline matched no known wreck. And when they enhanced the imaging, letters appeared faintly carved into the hull. Crimson Widow. The next night, the vessel's communication logs captured something, faint, distorted, but chilling. A bell. And then, a voice, distant yet clear. You wouldn't survive. The ocean never forgets. Beneath the turquoise waves of the Caribbean, where sunlight fades into green darkness, wrecks lie scattered like bones. And among them, buried deep beneath coral and time, sleeps the final chapter of the Crimson Widow, and the cursed soul of Elias Gray. The beginning of the curse. Long before the widow's legend haunted sailors, Elias Gray was just a boy from Bristol, a dockhand with salt on his skin and hunger in his belly. He dreamed of adventure, of freedom, of gold shimmering under foreign suns. So when a pirate named Captain Rourke offered him a place aboard the Crimson Widow, he didn't hesitate. But freedom, he learned, has a cost. Rourke's ship was no ordinary vessel. It carried a Spanish relic, stolen from a burning galleon, a golden compass encrusted with rubies, said to have belonged to the monks of San Avila. The monks claimed it pointed not north, but to Asterisk, the heart of the sea. Asterisk. Elias remembered the first time he saw it, resting on Rourke's table, glowing faintly in the dark cabin. It's cursed, one of the older crew whispered. Rourke laughed. Everything worth keeping is cursed. The storm and the sin. Weeks later, while fleeing Spanish patrols, the widow was caught in a storm unlike any other. Lightning tore the sky apart. The ocean itself seemed to rise in anger. Elias, gripping the mast, saw the compass rolling across the deck, its needle spinning wildly. Rourke screamed at his men to hold the course, but the sea had already chosen their fate. A wall of water struck the ship broadside, splintering the hull. Men screamed. The world turned black. When Elias awoke, the storm had passed. Half the crew was gone. The compass lay cracked beside Rourke's lifeless hand. Elias picked it up. And in that moment, he heard something whisper in the back of his mind. You took what was mine. The voice was not human. It was the sea itself. The pact. Days turned into nightmares. Stranded in dead waters, the remaining crew began to vanish one by one. Some leapt overboard, drawn by unseen voices. Others were found with their faces pale and their lungs full of salt water, though the sea had been calm. Desperate, Elias turned to the broken compass. Take me home, he begged. I'll give anything.
The needle stopped spinning. It pointed downward, straight into the depths. And the sea answered. You shall sail forever. You and all who follow you. You wanted freedom. I give you mine, eternal and cruel. The water rose. The ship trembled. And with a final roar of thunder, the Crimson Widow was swallowed whole. The drowned awakening. When Elias opened his eyes again, the world was silent. The sea was gone. The ship drifted through endless fog. The crew moved like shadows, eyes hollow, voices gone. He stumbled to the deck, and there, nailed to the mast, hung Rourke's corpse. Above it, carved into the wood, were words no human hand had written. Asterisk, the sea remembers. Asterisk. From that day forward, the Crimson Widow became the sea's warden, cursed to hunt those who disrespected her, those who spilled innocent blood upon her tides. Elias was her captain now, not by choice, but by debt. The endless voyage. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. But the widow sailed on, drifting between storms, her sails tattered but strong. Elias watched ships come and go, merchantmen, navies, explorers. He saw the birth of steam, the rise of machines. But he never aged. He could not die. Sometimes, when the fog thinned, he would see the reflection of his old self, young, hopeful, human. Then the sea would whisper, "You chose this." And the vision would fade. The Fisherman's Encounter, modern day. In 2021, near the Turks and Caicos, a small fishing trawler named Mara's Grace reported strange readings, a ghostly radar contact moving at impossible speed. The crew joked at first, calling it the ghost ship. Then their lights went out. Captain Luis Ortega described what he saw before the recording cut off. A faint red glow rising from the sea, followed by the toll of a bell. He shouted, "Who's there?" And a voice, clear as day, replied, "You took what was mine." Moments later, every electronic system on board failed. The Mara's Grace was found 2 days later, drifting in calm seas. No crew. No damage. Only saltwater pooling on the deck, as if the ocean had stepped aboard and walked among them. The truth beneath the waves. Marine archaeologists revisiting the Crimson Widow wreck in 2024 finally uncovered part of her captain's quarters. Inside a sealed compartment, they found a single preserved parchment, written in a trembling hand. It read, "I was wrong to steal from her. The sea is not ours to take. She is alive, and she is angry. When the compass broke, I broke the world. I tried to return it, but the deep does not forgive. To those who sail above, remember me not as a monster, but as a warning. The sea keeps what it claims." The document ended with a symbol, a compass pointing straight down. The final storm. That night, the research vessel lost contact. Satellite imagery captured a brief flash of red light over the site, followed by a swirl of disturbed water, miles wide. No wreckage was ever found. Only static on the radio, faint but unmistakable. Bell tolls 3 times. The sea remembers. Epilogue, the price of freedom. They say that every sailor, before his first voyage, should whisper an oath to the ocean, not out of fear, but respect. Because the sea is not a void. It listens. It watches. It judges. And somewhere, beneath the endless waves, Elias Gray still stands at the helm of his cursed ship, eyes glowing crimson, compass cracked, forever steering toward the horizon that never comes. He does not hate the living. He envies them. "You sail free," he whispers into the dark. "Remember what that costs. Every legend ends where it began, beneath the waves. The ocean floor was silent. A graveyard of ships, each one a memory carved into the sand. But deeper still, beyond the reach of divers and light, something moved. It wasn't a current. It was older, deliberate. Alive. The expedition. In 2035, a deep-sea research team known as the Oceanic Dawn Project launched an expedition to map the deepest trench in the Caribbean, a chasm sailors once called the Widow's Mouth. The crew of 12, led by Dr. Naomi Reeve, descended aboard the submersible Abyssal 1. Their mission, to locate the true wreck of the Crimson Widow. At 12,000 feet, sonar detected a faint metallic anomaly. Naomi leaned toward the monitor, breath fogging the glass. "There," she whispered. "It's her." The image sharpened, a massive wooden hull resting unnaturally upright, barnacles covering her like armor. The figurehead, once a woman's form, was eroded into something skeletal. As they drew closer, the sub's floodlights flickered. The sound beneath. The radio crackled. Then came a sound, faint, rhythmic. Like metal striking metal. The bell. The same pattern recorded in 1998. 3 tolls. The crew froze. Naomi turned to the sonar tech. "Is that surface interference?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. It's coming from below us." The lights flickered again, then died. The awakening. In the dark, something pressed against the hull of the submersible, slow, heavy, dragging along the metal skin. "Pressure spike," the engineer shouted. Static screamed through the comms, then a voice, impossibly distant, yet clear as thought. "You found what was meant to be forgotten." Naomi's eyes widened. "Who's speaking?" "Identify yourself." The voice replied, almost gently. "The captain." Outside, the cameras captured a shape rising from the wreck, a man in tattered black, his face hidden by shadow, eyes burning faintly crimson. Chains trailed from his wrists, floating like ribbons of smoke in the water. Elias Gray. He raised a hand, and the compass embedded in the Widow's deck began to glow. The needle spun, then pointed directly at the sub. The entire sea seemed to breathe. The deep memory. Naomi's log, recovered weeks later, contained her last words, recorded in a trembling voice. "It's not a wreck. It's alive. The ship, she's grown into the seabed. The wood moves like muscle. There's something beneath her, something ancient. Elias isn't the curse. He's the prisoner." Moments later, seismic sensors in the region registered a tremor, as if something enormous had shifted deep below. The return of the Widow. 2 days later, the research vessel Oceanic Dawn lost all contact with its sub. Then, at 3:14 a.m., the crew on the surface reported seeing a red light beneath the waves, vast, pulsing, and rising. When it broke the surface, the ocean glowed crimson for miles. For 7 minutes, satellites captured what appeared to be a full-sized wooden ship breaching the water, masts, sails, all, surrounded by a vortex of light. Then it sank again, leaving only silence and static. The Abyssal 1 was found weeks later, intact, but empty. 12 seats. No bodies. Only seawater on the floor and a single compass resting on the console, pointing straight down. The message in the deep. Months later, an autonomous drone sent to remap the trench transmitted one final video before vanishing. In it, a faint silhouette could be seen, a massive ship resting in the dark. The hull glowed faintly red, and carved into the bow, new letters appeared, jagged, fresh, impossible for human hands to reach. She waits. Epilogue, the sea's last secret. They say the ocean holds 95% of its depths unexplored. Some call that a frontier. Others, a warning. For centuries, humanity has taken from the sea, gold, oil, fish, lives, never believing it could take something back. But sometimes, when storms gather off the Caribbean coast, and the wind dies suddenly, sailors hear it. A bell, tolling 3 times. Then a whisper, carried through the mist. You took what was mine. And far beneath, the crimson widow stirs again, her crimson light pulsing faintly, waiting for the next ship foolish enough to seek her out. Because legends never die. They only sink. You wouldn't survive. The sea doesn't forgive. It remembers. Months had passed since the Crimson Widow last surfaced. The world moved on, headlines faded, ships sailed, and the trench returned to silence. But the ocean never forgets. The discovery. In early 2036, satellite images detected something impossible off the Bahamian coast, a new island that wasn't there before. Small. Circular. Surrounded by unnaturally red coral. Marine biologist Dr. Naomi Reeve's sister, Elena Reeve, joined a private exploration company to investigate. She didn't believe the island was new, she believed it had returned. When their vessel approached, compasses spun. Birds refused to fly overhead. The waves were unnaturally calm, like the ocean was holding its breath. They anchored near shore, and that's when they saw it, a mast, blackened and barnacle-crusted, jutting out from the sand. At its top, a torn flag flapped faintly in the wind, a crimson widow spider, faded but unmistakable. The shoreline. The sand was red. Not coral, not clay, red like old blood. Elena bent down and picked up a shard of glass. Etched into it were letters. E.g. She froze. Elias Gray. Every pirate historian knew the name. But no one had ever found proof of his final resting place. Until now. The whispers in the wind. At night, the crew camped on the island. That's when the voices began. Faint, carried through the breeze. Not speech, rhythm. A sea shanty. The widow sails when the moon runs red. She calls the lost, she wakes the dead. The fire crackled. Shadows moved between the palms, not animals, but shapes. Figures with tricorn hats and rusted cutlasses, half-rotted, watching from the tree-line. Then came the bell. 3 slow tolls. The return of the crew. Elena ran to the beach. The tide was receding, and beneath the waves, the outline of a ship appeared, the Crimson Widow, her blackened hull rising from the water like a corpse gasping for air. As she watched, the sand beneath her shifted. Bones. Thousands of them. An entire crew buried in the beach, rising as the ship returned. The air turned cold, the stars dimmed, and the ocean's horizon began to glow red. The captain's mark. At the center of the island stood a single stone, carved with symbols older than English. It pulsed faintly, in rhythm with the waves. When Elena touched it, her vision blurred. She saw flashes, Elias Gray on his ship, bound in chains, surrounded by screaming men. The widow's compass burning, the sea itself twisting around them. The awakening of the widow. The ocean surged, swallowing the shoreline. Lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the ship, whole again, sails unfurled, glowing crimson. At the helm stood Elias Gray. Alive. Eyes blazing with fury and sorrow. He looked at Elena and spoke, voice echoing like thunder. You came for her. But you will stay for me. The mist swirled, wrapping around the crew, their screams fading into the roar of the sea. And then, silence. When the storm cleared, the island was gone. The aftermath. Weeks later, a U.S. Coast Guard vessel found an empty lifeboat drifting near Nassau. Inside was a journal, soaked but legible. The last entry read, "The sea isn't just water. It's memory. The Crimson Widow doesn't sail, she remembers. Every soul who seeks her becomes part of her story." On the last page, written in shaky red ink, were 4 words. She has my voice. Epilogue, The Forgotten Shore. Satellite scans of the Caribbean continue to detect anomalous magnetic patterns near the coordinates where the island once appeared. They come and go, like the tide. But fishermen still whisper, when the moon turns red and the wind dies, of a ship that glows beneath the waves. Of bells tolling 3 times. Of voices calling for home. And sometimes, on calm nights near Nassau, a faint song drifts across the water. The widow sails when the moon runs red. Her debt's not paid, nor her hunger fed. Every sea has an ending, but this story never does. The calm before the unknown. After the sea turned red that night, the world went quiet. Satellite feeds blurred with static, and the Caribbean waters, once full of tourist ships and trade routes, became a no-sail zone. The currents grew unpredictable. Compasses spun without reason. For weeks, the U.S. Coast Guard received strange reports, phantom ships glimpsed under moonlight, red glows rising from the water, and a bell tolling faintly across hundreds of miles. The legend of the Crimson Widow was alive again. And then, the disappearances began. Fishing boats vanished. Cargo ships drifted back without crews. Only saltwater and claw-like gouges along their hulls remained. The world wanted an explanation. But none came. The broadcast. In the chaos, a pirate radio transmission broke through international frequencies, faint, warped by distance, echoing like it came from beneath the sea. This is Dr. Naomi Reeve. If you hear this, don't follow the light. It's not calling you, it's calling her back. Then silence. That was the last anyone heard from the Oceanic Dawn Project. The Modern Curse. Months later, an independent filmmaker named Eli Carter, known for deep-sea documentaries, decided to chase the story. He wanted the truth, or at least, a film that would make him famous. In June of 2036, he and his crew boarded a small vessel, the Horizon's End, armed with drones, submersibles, and sonar tech far beyond what Naomi's team had used. They reached the Widow's Mouth Trench on the third night. At first, it was peaceful. Too peaceful. The wind stopped. The stars vanished. And the ocean began to glow. "Are you recording?" Eli whispered. The cameras rolled, but the footage glitched. Every few seconds, frames would skip, as if time itself was refusing to be captured. Then came the bell. 3 tolls. The haunting below. Eli's voice trembled into the recorder. "Something's down there. We can see shapes. A ship, moving against the current. The sails are burning, but not with fire. It's like asterisk light underwater." The sea erupted. The Horizon's End was pulled sideways as a vortex opened beneath it, spinning faster and faster until the night sky itself seemed to bend. Crew members screamed. One by one, the radios went dead. Only Eli kept speaking, his voice calm, eerily detached. "I see her. The captain's ship. He's not steering. She is." Static devoured his final words. The archive. 3 months later, fragments of Eli's footage washed ashore in Puerto Rico, sealed inside a waterproof drone casing. The video was incomplete. But what it showed changed everything. A wooden ship, impossibly intact, sailing through bioluminescent darkness. Its sails stitched with bone. Its hull breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs. And on its deck, 12 silhouettes, standing perfectly still. One of them, unmistakably, was Dr. Naomi Reeve. She turned to the camera, eyes glowing faintly red, and whispered, "We're not dead. We're part of her. The circle of the sea." Since then, the region around the Widow's Mouth has been declared off-limits. Satellites avoid it. Ships reroute. But sometimes, when the moon is blood red and the tides are high, sailors claim they see the Crimson Widow sailing across the horizon. No crew. No sound. Just a bell, tolling 3 times. Each time she appears, another ship is reported missing within the week. Epilogue: The Endless Horizon. They say the ocean is endless, but maybe it's not distance that makes it infinite. Maybe it's memory. The ghosts of those lost at sea do not rest below, they sail forever, bound by the same hunger that drove them in life: greed, revenge, survival. The Crimson Widow sails on, her crimson light flickering through fog and thunder, her cursed captain chained to her deck, his eyes watching the living world fade behind him. And somewhere deep below, where no sunlight has ever touched, something ancient still waits, whispering through the water, calling the next soul foolish enough to listen. Every tide brings one more. Every soul becomes the sea. Because legends never end, they only drift beyond the horizon. And the bell keeps tolling. You wouldn't survive. Even when the horizon seems calm, the sea is never asleep. The legend that never sleeps. Long after Jonas Reed's disappearance, whispers of the Crimson Widow became more than legend. Satellite feeds occasionally flickered with red pulses where the sea should have been dark. Fishermen along the Caribbean coasts reported strange compasses spinning wildly, fog rising without wind, and the faint sound of a bell tolling 3 times. Elias Gray, once a man, now a shadow chained to the deck of the Widow, continued his eternal voyage, eyes glowing crimson in the fog, a captain cursed to watch the living world sail by without pause. A modern encounter. In 2042, a team of marine archaeologists set sail aboard the Abyss Chaser, determined to explore an anomalous sonar reading near the original wreck site. Dr. Lila Moreno, lead scientist, documented the mission. The sea was unusually still. Compasses spun, and the water shimmered red beneath the surface. I thought it was an optical illusion, until we saw it. The submersible cameras captured the Crimson Widow emerging silently from the depths. The ship was intact, sails billowing though no wind moved them, and faint red light radiated from the deck. Aboard the ship stood 12 figures, seemingly human, yet motionless, like mannequins carved from shadows. At the helm, Elias Gray, eyes fixed on the horizon, his chains dragging across the deck. "We are always watching," Lila whispered, terrified. The warning. As the crew approached, the radio crackled. A distorted voice filled the cabin. "You will not take what is mine. You will not escape. The sea remembers all." The submersible's instruments went haywire. Pressure spiked, lights flickered, and the water outside glowed crimson as if alive. The crew realized, the Widow wasn't just a ghost ship, it was sentient. One by one, the crew felt themselves drawn to the viewport, unable to look away. Each saw their own reflection in the red glow, older, hollow-eyed, chained to the deck alongside the crew of the Widow. The escape that wasn't. Dr. Moreno ordered a rapid ascent. But the ocean seemed to resist. Currents pulled the sub downwards, and the red glow enveloped them, filling the cabin with a chilling presence. "The sea takes only what it wants," Elias Gray's voice echoed from nowhere. "And the debt is eternal." The crew of the Abyss Chaser vanished from all records. Their vessel was later found adrift, empty, instruments fried, and the log completely blank except for one sentence etched on the control panel. "She watches, always. The eternal watch." The Caribbean remains haunted. Fishermen, sailors, and even satellite observers report strange phenomena. Red glows appearing and disappearing without warning. Ships drifting mysteriously near the old wreck site. The sound of a tolling bell heard over calm waters. Even when the horizon seems calm, the sea is never asleep. The legend that never sleeps. Long after Jonas Reed's disappearance, whispers of the Crimson Widow became more than legend. Satellite feeds occasionally flickered with red pulses where the sea should have been dark. Fishermen along the Caribbean coasts reported strange compasses spinning wildly, fog rising without wind, and the faint sound of a bell tolling 3 times. Elias Gray, once a man, now a shadow chained to the deck of the Widow, continued his eternal voyage, eyes glowing crimson in the fog, a captain cursed to watch the living world sail by without pause. A modern encounter. In 2042, a team of marine archaeologists set sail aboard the Abyss Chaser, determined to explore an anomalous sonar reading near the original wreck site. Dr. Lila Moreno, lead scientist, documented the mission. The sea was unusually still. Compasses spun, and the water shimmered red beneath the surface. I thought it was an optical illusion, until we saw it. The submersible cameras captured the Crimson Widow emerging silently from the depths. The ship was intact, sails billowing though no wind moved them, and faint red light radiated from the deck. Aboard the ship stood 12 figures, seemingly human, yet motionless, like mannequins carved from shadows. At the helm, Elias Gray, eyes fixed on the horizon, his chains dragging across the deck. "We are always watching," Lila whispered, terrified. The warning. As the crew approached, the radio crackled. A distorted voice filled the cabin. "You will not take what is mine. You will not escape. The sea remembers all." The submersible's instruments went haywire. Pressure spiked, lights flickered, and the water outside glowed crimson as if alive. The crew realized, the Widow wasn't just a ghost ship, it was sentient. One by one, the crew felt themselves drawn to the viewport, unable to look away. Each saw their own reflection in the red glow, older, hollow-eyed, chained to the deck alongside the crew of the Widow. The escape that wasn't. Dr. Moreno ordered a rapid ascent. But the ocean seemed to resist. Currents pulled the sub downwards, and the red glow enveloped them, filling the cabin with a chilling presence. "The sea takes only what it wants," Elias Gray's voice echoed from nowhere. "And the debt is eternal." The crew of the Abyss Chaser vanished from all records. Their vessel was later found adrift, empty, instruments fried, and the log completely blank except for one sentence etched on the control panel. "She watches, always. The eternal watch. The Caribbean remains haunted." Fishermen, sailors, and even satellite observers report strange phenomena. Red glows appearing and disappearing without warning. Ships drifting mysteriously near the old wreck site. The sound of a tolling bell heard over calm waters. Elias Gray and his crew continue their patrol, guardians and prisoners alike, bound by chains of salt and time. The Crimson Widow does not hunt for gold. It does not seek revenge. It seeks witnesses, the living, to remember the price of defiance. Epilogue: the watch never ends. Every sailor who crosses the Caribbean waters may unknowingly sail beneath the gaze of the Widow. The horizon is no longer a line to chase or a destination to reach. It is a boundary of the living world and the eternal watch below. And when the bell tolls 3 times in the distance, remember. She sees. She waits. She never sleeps. The Crimson Widow sails on. Elias Gray stands at her helm. And the sea keeps its eternal vigil. The sea doesn't take prisoners. It collects debts. The return of the tide. 3 years after Eli Carter's disappearance, the ocean was restless again. Storms formed where none should exist. Ships vanished from clear weather and reappeared months later, drifting aimlessly, their hulls coated in salt thicker than bone. Among the few who dared to venture close to the Widow's mouth was Captain Jonas Reed, a retired Navy diver obsessed with solving maritime mysteries. He had watched Eli's recovered footage 100 times. And in those flickering frames, Jonas noticed something everyone else missed, a symbol carved into the side of the Crimson Widow's hull. A spiral. The same spiral etched into the ancient pirate coins of the 17th century, a mark tied to a woman known only as Isolde, rumored to be the last witch of the Caribbean. Jonas believed the ship wasn't cursed, it was anchored, bound by something alive beneath it. He was determined to find out what. The descent. In October 2039, Jonas and his two-person crew sailed under the pretense of a private salvage mission. Their vessel, the Drowned Star, carried one submersible, sonar equipment, and a digital log meant to stream live data to the mainland. As they crossed into restricted waters, the instruments began to flicker. GPS failed. And then, just as the sun set, the ocean lit up, a deep crimson pulse spreading outward like a heartbeat. Jonas stared down into the glow. The spiral symbol appeared again, massive, shifting beneath the surface, like something breathing. "It's not a current," he whispered. "It's a signal." They descended. The depths of memory. At 1,400 meters, the light surrounded them. Fish bones floated in still water, suspended as if time itself had stopped. And then, the submersible's cameras caught something impossible, a forest of shipwrecks, their masts and hulls arranged in a perfect spiral. At the center, the Crimson Widow. She wasn't decaying. She was alive. Jonas and his team drifted closer. Wooden planks flexed like ribs. Chains writhed as though pulled by unseen hands. A faint voice whispered through the water. "Return what was stolen." The submersible's readings spiked. Temperatures plummeted. And then, from the darkness, a face appeared, pale, hollow-eyed, floating inches from the glass. Naomi Reeve. But her mouth didn't move. Her voice filled the cabin like the sea itself. "You came for answers, Captain. The sea only gives one." The awakening. The spiral began to rotate. Shipwrecks groaned, shifting in unison. The Crimson Widow's sails unfurled, under thousands of meters of pressure, and yet, the water didn't resist. It was as if the laws of nature had been rewritten. Jonas screamed into the radio, "Surface now," but the sub wouldn't move. The light beneath them pulsed again, and a shape rose from below, larger than any ship, larger than any creature known to man. A body. Ancient, stone-like, covered in carvings of storms and ships. The mother of the deep. And within her open chest cavity, 1,000 souls flickered like embers in water. Eli Carter among them. Naomi Reeve. Every sailor lost to the widow's curse. The water burst upward, turning the sea into a red storm visible from space. The last transmission. The U.S. Coast Guard received one final broadcast from Jonas's ship. His voice was faint, distorted, but clear enough to transcribe. "We opened her heart. It was never a curse, it was hunger. Every ship, every storm, it's her feeding. The sea isn't alive, it is her. Static consumed the rest. The drowned star never returned. Hashtag 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 aftermath. Weeks later, satellites captured footage of the Caribbean Sea glowing in faint, rhythmic pulses. Maritime experts claimed it was a bioluminescent bloom. But those who knew the stories, those who had seen the Crimson Widow, said otherwise. The pulse was the sound of her breathing. And when the tides shift unnaturally, when waves roll in threes and the wind carries a whisper of bells, sailors know to look away. Because she's still searching. Not for treasure. Not for vengeance. For souls. Epilogue, the final tide. In the end, the horrible life of pirates was never about gold or glory. It was about debt, the kind you can never pay, the kind that binds you forever to the sea that once gave you freedom. Every captain, every crewman, every lost explorer who challenged the ocean thought they could conquer it. They were wrong. The sea remembers. The sea collects. And when the horizon glows red again, you'll know that the Crimson Widow has set sail once more, with her eternal crew of the damned, guided by the hunger of the deep. The tide always returns. And so will she. The ocean does not forgive, it only collects. The Surge. In 2045, commercial shipping in the Caribbean saw the first of what would later be called the Vanishing Fleet. Entire fleets disappeared without trace, no distress signals, no debris, nothing but empty water where hundreds of sailors had been just hours before. Rumors spread quickly among local fishermen, a crimson glow beneath the waves, the faint toll of a bell, and shadowy masts appearing in fog only to vanish seconds later. Authorities dismissed the claims. Insurance companies grew wary. And yet, the disappearances continued. The investigation. Marine historian Dr. Mateo Vargas assembled a team of oceanographers and deep-sea divers to investigate. Their vessel, the Sea Sentinel, was equipped with the latest sonar, underwater drones, and reinforced hulls. As they approached the coordinates of the last known disappearances, instruments went haywire. Compasses spun uncontrollably, and sonar readings displayed impossible shapes moving faster than any known sea creature. Dr. Vargas documented his concern. We are not looking at natural phenomena. Something is controlling the water, something ancient. The encounter. At twilight, the team's drones captured movement below the surface, a massive black hole rising from the abyss, sails unfurling though there was no wind. It was the Crimson Widow, unmistakable, bathed in a red glow. Chains rattled along the deck. Figures moved with precision, a dozen, all chained, all with glowing crimson eyes. And at the helm, Elias Gray, commanding with an authority that transcended mortality. It's not hunting, whispered one diver. It's collecting. The unseen grip. The team attempted to retreat. But the ocean itself resisted. Currents twisted unnaturally, pulling their vessel closer. Drones were torn from control, sonar went dead, and a low hum, like distant tolling, filled the water. The team realized the horrifying truth: the Widow's domain extended beyond physical limits. She did not merely sail the sea, she bent it to her will. Dr. Vargas recorded his last words before the transmission cut. She does not take the living by chance. She selects, binds, and transforms them. Every ship, every soul, another addition to the crew. The aftermath. Weeks later, the Caribbean waters returned to a deceptive calm. Fishermen reported no signs of the fleet, no floating debris, and no evidence of what had occurred. But the legend only grew. Sailors now whisper of the vanishing fleet, vessels that leave ports and never reach their destinations, their crews forever part of the Widow's eternal patrol. The Crimson Widow sails still, chains dragging, compass cracked, her captain bound and watching the horizon. And with every tide, the ocean claims another soul. Epilogue: The Ocean's Grip. The horrible life of pirates never truly ended, it only transformed. Elias Gray and his cursed crew are no longer men of flesh and bone, they are eternal sentinels of the sea, bound by its hunger and memory. And when the bell tolls 3 times across a calm night at sea, mariners know. The Crimson Widow comes. And you will vanish. The sea is patient. It waits. And its judgment is eternal. The sea has secrets that no map can show, and some are better left undiscovered. A new generation. By 2048, the story of the Crimson Widow had become folklore, a cautionary tale told to sailors and children alike. But for the adventurous, it remained a challenge. A young explorer named Kai Mercer assembled a small team of divers and oceanographers aboard the Abyss Walker, determined to uncover the truth once and for all. Their equipment was the most advanced ever built: submersibles, drones, magnetic sensors, and pressure suits capable of descending deeper than any previous human attempt. Kai's first entry in the expedition log read: "We're not here for legends. We're here for truth, and if the stories are true, we may not come back." The descent into silence. As the Abyss Walker approached the coordinates of the last confirmed sighting, the ocean became unnaturally still. No wind, no waves, only a faint crimson shimmer in the depths. Compasses spun wildly. Sonar returned echoes that made no sense, shapes moving faster than any natural phenomenon. At 2,000 meters, the first sight appeared, a dark silhouette, massive, unmoving. The shape slowly resolved into the unmistakable outline of the Crimson Widow, her sails glowing faintly red, chains rattling along the deck. At her helm, a shadow, Elias Gray. His eyes burned like coals in the fog. "She waits," whispered one crew member. "And we've sailed right into her gaze." The shadow moves. The water itself seemed to shift around the widow. Currents twisted unnaturally. Suddenly, the ocean floor below the submersible pulsed with movement, thousands of shapes, skeletal and shadowed, all circling the ship in synchronized motion. The crew realized that the widow's domain was far larger than anyone had imagined. She commanded not just her own ship, but the depths themselves. Elias Gray's voice filled the submersible's cabin without explanation. "The debt is not yet paid. The sea remembers every hand that ever took what was hers." The capture. Attempts to ascend failed. Currents forced the submersible closer to the widow. Red light filled the cabin. The figures on deck of the ship lifted their heads, revealing hollow eyes, and one by one, the crew saw their own reflections in the glowing faces, pale, chained, eternal. Kai realized the horrifying truth: the widow didn't just claim the living. She absorbed them, folding their souls into her eternal crew. The submersible shuddered violently. Instruments exploded. One last log entry from Kai Mercer was transmitted before the feed died. "We are all part of her now, she is endless, and she watches." Epilogue: The deep remembers. The Caribbean remains a treacherous expanse of water. Fishermen report sudden fogs, flashes of crimson light under calm seas, and the toll of a distant bell. The Crimson Widow sails still, her captain chained to the helm, eyes glowing red, and a crew bound in eternity. No ship, no human, no legend can escape her grasp. The shadow of the deep stretches far beyond the horizon, and those who enter her waters may never return. The sea is patient. It waits. It takes. The ocean keeps its own counsel, and some debts are never forgiven. The rising tide. By 2050, reports of missing vessels around the Caribbean had reached an unprecedented level. Entire cargo convoys vanished, leaving only radar blips and occasional distress calls filled with static. Local legends had grown into international concern. Experts spoke in hushed tones about the Crimson Widow and her cursed captain, Elias Gray, as if invoking their names aloud might draw the ship nearer. Among the remaining skeptics was Captain Adrian Holt, a seasoned deep-sea explorer, who had spent years studying anomalies in the Caribbean. He believed there was a tangible explanation, some natural phenomenon, a unique magnetic current, yet even he could not ignore the crimson pulses recorded by satellites and ships. The approach. Adrian and his crew aboard the Ocean Phantom approached the coordinates where the last sightings had been recorded. Compasses spun wildly. Sonar detected massive objects moving with impossible speed and precision. Through the fog and crimson glow, a figure emerged, the Crimson Widow, sails unfurling as if catching an unseen wind, her hull breathing in and out like a living organism. Chains rattled along the deck, and shadowy forms moved in unison. At the helm, Elias Gray turned his burning eyes toward the approaching vessel. "Another reaches for the horizon, another joins the reckoning," muttered Adrian. The confrontation. The crew of the Ocean Phantom deployed their submersibles, attempting to document the ship without getting too close. But the ocean shifted as though it were alive. Currents twisted violently, creating whirlpools that dragged water downwards. The Widow seemed to command the very waves. Red light filled the submersible, illuminating skeletal figures on the deck, their eyes glowing crimson. And then, from the depths, a massive shadow rose, the mother of the deep, an ancient being that seemed to encompass the ocean floor itself. "The sea has grown impatient," Elias Gray's voice echoed in the submersible, "and judgment is upon all who trespass." The reckoning. The submersibles were ripped from control. Crew members vanished in moments, drawn toward the Widow's deck, their forms dissolving into shadows before joining the eternal crew. Adrian realized too late that this was not a ship. It was a sentient entity, a living embodiment of the sea's memory and fury. Every sailor, pirate, and explorer who had wronged the ocean was bound within her, and now the living were becoming part of that eternal tally. The Ocean Phantom capsized as a crimson wave surged over it. Communications went silent. Epilogue: The Crimson Horizon. Weeks later, debris from the expedition was found, twisted metal, melted electronics, and a single artifact, a compass, cracked and glowing faintly red, its needle spinning endlessly. Sailors still whisper about crimson lights beneath calm waters and the tolling bell that echoes across miles of ocean. The Crimson Widow sails on, bound to Elias Gray, her eternal crew growing with each passing decade. The sea keeps its debt, and its reckoning is unending. She waits. She remembers. She collects. The horizon may seem calm. But beneath it, the sea is alive, and the Crimson Widow is ever vigilant. The sea never forgets. And some debts can never be repaid. The disturbance. By 2052, global maritime traffic had grown cautious around the Caribbean. Satellite imagery occasionally recorded crimson pulses beneath calm waters, prompting warnings to all shipping lanes. Dr. Kai Mercer's earlier disappearance had become a chilling legend. But some researchers, driven by curiosity and greed, ignored the warnings. Among them was Lena Corwin, a daring oceanographer with a history of deep-sea explorations. Her team aboard the Abyssal Vanguard was determined to uncover the truth about the Crimson Widow once and for all. The approach. As the Abyssal Vanguard neared the site of the last confirmed sightings, instruments began to fail. Compasses spun uncontrollably. Drones lost connection. Sonar readings returned impossible shapes moving faster than any known sea creature. Through the fog and crimson haze, the unmistakable silhouette appeared, the Crimson Widow. Sails glowing faintly red, chains rattling, hull breathing as though alive. Shadows of chained figures moved rhythmically across the deck. At the helm, Elias Gray watched, eyes glowing crimson, chains dragging across the deck with every subtle movement. "The reckoning has come," Lena whispered. "And we are already part of it." The awakening. The ocean itself began to react violently. Currents shifted, waves twisted, and the very water pulsed in rhythm with the ship. From the depths, a massive shadow rose, the mother of the deep, a creature larger than any natural sea being, covered in runes and the remains of countless wrecks. The crew realized the truth. The Crimson Widow was no longer simply a ship. She had become a living, sentient force, the embodiment of the sea's memory, fury, and hunger. Elias Gray's voice echoed inside the submersible, seeming to come from every direction. "All who enter here belong to her. All debts must be paid." The consumption. Attempts to ascend failed. Red light enveloped the vessel. Crew members were drawn toward the Widow's deck, one by one, their forms dissolving into shadows before merging with the eternal crew. Lena tried to resist but felt herself being pulled into the glow. Reflections in the crimson light revealed her own chained form among the undead crew. "We are all part of her now," she thought. "She is endless, and eternal." The submersible collapsed under the weight of the ocean's pressure, leaving only a cracked, red-tinged compass and static-filled transmissions as evidence. Even legends need rest, and the sea whispers its lullaby. As the crimson glow of the Crimson Widow faded beneath the horizon, the ocean returned to its calm, rhythmic heartbeat. The wind softened, waves kissed the hulls of distant ships, and the sky reflected a gentle twilight. The souls bound to the Widow, the cursed crew, and even those brave explorers who had witnessed her power, drifted into a deep, eternal slumber within the sea's embrace. Not gone, not freed, simply resting in the cradle of the deep, where time moves differently, and the ocean guards them like a patient sentinel. Fishermen still hear the distant tolling of a bell in the night, but now it carries a softer note, a lullaby for those who watch and wait. The sea, vast and unending, hums a gentle song. Sleep, wanderers of the deep. Sleep, for tomorrow the tide rises again. Beneath the waves, the Crimson Widow rests, her sails folded, her chains still, and her captain's eyes closed in quiet reprieve. The ocean has claimed its legends, and for a fleeting moment, the horrors of the past yield to peace. And as you close your eyes tonight, remember, even the restless sea sleeps, until the next tide.